Probably the hardest part of this build is figuring out a place to put all of my parts. You'll notice down here on the floor I've got a large pallet. Inside of that pallet is a whole bunch of metal sheets, but it takes up a huge spot of space on my floor. On top of that, eventually I'm going to have space to put wings and other parts. So in this video I'm going to turn this into this. Originally I thought that maybe I could just stand the pallet up, standing upright against the wall. That presented some issues in my head because I need to have a place where I can store the wings once I've completed building them. And additionally, if I were to just use the pallet, how would I open and close it in order to get the metal sheets out? And so I decided to create an enclosure for the sheet metal, but also create sort of a fixture where I could hang the wings when I completed working on this. So probably the most important thing when I built this was to put it on casters. In my small garage space, I need to be able to move this around to be able to, push it to a different place as needed. And if it was just sitting on the floor, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Two of the casters have locking wheels on them so that once I've put it into place, I can lock that down and it doesn't roll around nearly as easily anymore. Lift that up and it rolls again. So it's out of the way and it opens up a big bunch of space here for a workspace. These long sheets of plywood here were actually part of the pallet originally. So they're 4 foot by 10 foot, and there's two of them, one here, one here. I just reused those. And inside of that pallet was all the large sheet metal parts from the airplane. I basically just moved them against the wall while I built the enclosure here. And then I just loaded them back into here and put some paper between each leaf just to make sure that parts didn't get damaged. Eventually I'm going to have some straps that will attach from the top here, go down and around, attach down here on the bottom, and the wing will sit inside of that kind of like a sling or a hammock maybe. And then there will be a second one that comes up over the top and has a latching clamp up here to tighten it so it holds it up against this. The idea is to keep the wing upright, standing like this, inside of each of these two slots. The first thing I did was to create the end parts and the middle part here, just sort of the skeleton of it, and then I fastened them with some screws going all the way down through the plywood into the 2x4 in the back side here. Uses basically the plywood here as a stressed member. I then added the casters while it was sitting here on the table. Made it a lot easier than if I had to build the whole thing and then lift it up with a jack or something like that to be able to put the casters underneath. And then the next step was to add this one side of plywood. And what I did first was added it to one side and then the other, and then the center one here I had laying on the ground underneath, and then I was able to tip it up to fit into the center section here. And again, I only had one piece of plywood at that point. The second one here I hadn't connected, and I was able to put screws through the plywood this direction into the 2x4. Then I took a 10-foot 2x4 that was connected to the bottom of my pallet, and I was able to drive that from one end all the way through. You might be able to see that down here. There's a 2x4 that runs all the way along the length. Then the last step was to put the other side. It's hard to lift it up by myself. It's a big piece of plywood, so I lifted it up with the help of my wife and set it down inside of here on top of this 2x4 at the bottom. The same thing on this side. The 2x4 sits underneath the plywood here. So the good thing about doing one side of plywood first is I was able to put screws all the way down the entire length of this. So I put 4 or 5 screws going all the way down into this plywood to the bottom. When you get to the second one though, you can't really reach your drill down onto the other side. So what I was able to do is put 2 or 3 of them down as far as I could onto this side, and then I used the hole saw and cut a hole into this first one that I drilled, and I was able to put another screw down here in the bottom, enough to hold it and make it nice and sturdy. So there you have it. There's a nice simple way to build a place to put both your sheet metal and your wings. Once you've got them finished, you can hang them there. If you want, I've got plans. They're out on my website. You're welcome to download the plan for it. I did a SolidWorks drawing of the whole thing before I built it, and created a drawing that I've posted on my website as well. And while I'm at it, maybe I should talk about this my workbench that I've built here. As I was building this, I wanted to make sure that I could use it in more than one way. And so basically what I did is just purchased a big piece of plywood. I didn't want a full 4 feet, so I cut off probably, I don't know, a foot or something off the end. I think it's 36 inches across instead of 48 or something like that. And then it's the full 8 feet long. I purchased some 2x4s and put screws down into the 2x4s. You can see them here. I mentioned this in another video, but when I first built it, I only had 2x4s going the length. And then I noticed that there was some bowing in the wood kind of going this way. And so I've now put several 2x4s going across this way as well. These sawhorses are totally foldable. They can go down to basically the size of just this top part. The legs fold up and go inside. I think I paid $100 for both of them or something like that on Amazon. But they give you this a way that you can put 2x4s into here to make a workbench out of it, and then you can put 2x4s the skinny way going across this way. And then I basically just cut out a notch of wood here to go underneath that, and then I screwed screws in through the plywood from on top down into this wood here, several into here, and then these long parts going down here. So I have several of those across the bottom of the desk here to give it a nice flat top. And then the idea is that when I get to a point where I'm ready to put the fuselage up on a set of sawhorses, I can just take this top off and the fuselage can just sit on top of the sawhorses instead. So again, 2 birds, 1 stone, trying to make the best use of my space, which is a very small space, try to make the best use of this space so that I can work on parts as it makes sense. Obviously everybody kind of wants to start working on the fuselage because then it really looks like an airplane at that point. In this small space I can't do that. I basically have to start building the control surfaces, which we've already kind of done. So the wings will probably be coming next. Might do the control surfaces for the wings, ailerons, and flaps next. I'm not really sure. Anyway, whatever I do, those parts need to be able to stack out of the way as well. So that's the beauty of this device. I can get them out of the way and I can still have space to work within this small garage. Anyway, that wraps this video up. Thanks for following along with this Sonex Aircraft build, and consider subscribing. And we'll see you on the next one.